Welcome in, everybody. We're diving deep today into Reliance Industries. It's really a company that's grown right alongside India itself. It went from this small trading company, and now it's the largest private sector corporation in all of India.
Yeah, it's a story spanning, what, like 6 decades? And the most fascinating thing is how Reliance's journey really mirrors India's own economic evolution.
Hmm?
It's incredible. I mean, you think about how they navigated that restrictive license Raj era to then riding the wave of liberalization, and now they're leading the charge in things like green energy and digital technology. They've consistently anticipated those big economic shifts and then, like, reshaped entire industries. It's pretty remarkable.
It is. And it all begins with this one man, Dhirubhai Ambani. I mean, his story is really, it's the embodiment of ambition, right? And
Yeah.
transformation. That classic tale of a small town boy who makes good. I mean, he went from working at a gas station in a small village to working for Shell in Yemen. And then he goes back to India to start his own trading business. You really get a sense of his drive right from the beginning and his willingness to just take risks.
You can see that entrepreneurial spirit early on, absolutely. He starts by trading spices, right? But then pretty quickly he recognizes the potential in synthetic textiles. This is back in the 1960s when India's textile industry was largely focused on cotton. But Dhirubhai, he saw the future, he saw it in polyester, and that foresight really became like a hallmark of Reliance's success.
It makes sense, but starting a business back then in India, that was no easy feat.
Mm.
This is during the license Raj era. So a system of really strict government controls that made it like incredibly difficult for entrepreneurs to operate. I don't know, it's like trying to run a marathon with your legs tied together. I always wondered how anyone managed to build a successful business in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I mean, the license Raj, in theory, it was designed to protect those domestic industries, but it really ended up, I think, stifling innovation and entrepreneurship. Essentially, it meant that for almost every single aspect of your business, whether you're importing raw materials or expanding production, you needed permission. You needed government permission.
So how did Reliance even manage to thrive? I mean, under such restrictions,
Yeah.
what did they do?
Dhirubhai was known for his resourcefulness, his incredible resourcefulness. And let's just say he had a knack for maneuvering creatively within the system. He knew how to work the bureaucracy, how to build political connections, and he even knew how to leverage public opinion to his advantage.
There's that famous story, right? From 1982, when he needed to import the technology for polyester filament yarn. The government was hesitant, but he did something pretty audacious. He took out full-page newspaper ads and appealed directly to the public, arguing that this technology would benefit all of India. I mean, it was brilliant. It really put the pressure on the government.
It was. It was a master class in public relations, and it worked. The government eventually relented, and Reliance got the green light. It just shows you Dhirubhai wasn't simply a businessman. He was a strategist, he understood the power of perception, and he wasn't afraid to shake things up.
And this boldness, that extended to his approach to corporate financing, too. It was revolutionary for the time. He wanted regular, everyday Indians to feel like they were part of Reliance's growth. So he made it a point to make investing accessible to everybody. This created a sense of ownership and this feeling of loyalty among shareholders that really hadn't been seen before. He called it his equity cult.
Yeah, before Dhirubhai, owning stock in India was largely limited to the elite. He totally changed the game by offering shares at prices that were affordable, and he actively encouraged small investors to participate. He would hold these massive shareholder meetings. Sometimes they were in stadiums where he talked directly to them. And he explained things simply. It wasn't just about making money. It was about building like a community of believers in Reliance's vision.
I can't even imagine a shareholder meeting in a stadium. That must have been, what, like organizing a rock concert or something. But it speaks to his charisma and his ability to connect with people, just regular people.
Well, for sure, that personal touch fostered incredible loyalty. People felt like partners in Reliance's success, not just investors sitting on sidelines. And it was a strategy that paid off, big time. It created a vast and devoted shareholder base, which then fueled the company's growth.
So they start with textiles, but they don't stop there. It's Reliance, so of course they don't stop there. They realize pretty quickly that to control their costs and the quality of their product, they've got to make their own yarn. And that leads them to.
Petrochemicals. Reliance adopts this strategy of backward integration. So that means they start producing the raw materials that they need instead of relying on those outside suppliers. And that's when they build the Petalganga complex. It was one of the biggest polyester facilities in India at that time. It was a huge undertaking, but it gave them this significant edge over the competition.
And here's where we really start to see that signature Reliance move. They think big and they play the long game. Vertical integration, like you mentioned, becomes this recurring theme in their story.
Exactly. They're not content with just one piece of the puzzle. They want the whole thing. It's ambitious, sure, but it lets them manage costs, ensure quality, and they can respond quickly to any changes in the market.
But their little trip into petrochemicals was just a warm-up for what would be, I think, one of the most audacious moves in Indian corporate history, the Jamnagar refinery.
Right. It was a project of just unprecedented scale. Keep in mind, at the time, Reliance had zero experience in oil refining. A lot of people thought it was a crazy gamble. But Dhirubhai, he was determined to make India self-sufficient in petroleum products. He wanted to compete globally.
It's staggering, the scale of it. One of the largest refineries in the world, built on this previously barren stretch of coastal land in Gujarat. And they managed to complete it ahead of schedule and within budget. I bet that silenced a lot of critics.
Oh, I'm sure it did. It really established Reliance as a world-class infrastructure developer. They could execute these incredibly complex projects. But even more impressive is they didn't stop there. They kept expanding Jamnagar. And eventually it became the largest refining complex in the entire world. It shows you their commitment to scale and efficiency. It's incredible.
It's mind-blowing. But of course, Dhirubhai didn't rest. He had another ambitious goal. He wanted to connect all of India through telecommunications.
That's how Reliance Infocom was born. Dhirubhai had this vision where making phone calls would be cheaper than sending a postcard. It was bold, for sure, but it captured his vision of making communication affordable and accessible to everyone.
And to pull that off, they built a nationwide fiber optic network. Again, that commitment to large-scale infrastructure. But this venture, as we know, would later become a sticking point in the succession drama between his sons.
Yeah, it foreshadows the challenges that lie ahead, the complexities of managing a family business of this size, and those different personalities, the different visions that would come into play. But we'll get into all of that in just a bit.
Okay, so before we get into the succession saga and what comes after Dhirubhai, let's just stop and appreciate what he accomplished. He built an empire from nothing, navigated this unbelievably complex regulatory environment, and he turned Reliance into a global powerhouse. It's a remarkable story.
Oh, it is. It's a testament to his ambition, his unwavering ambition. He had this vision for a self-reliant India and this amazing ability to connect with people, to inspire millions. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a nation builder. He was a symbol of India's aspirations.
Absolutely. He laid the foundation for what Reliance is today, right? And it's a foundation built on boldness, on innovation, and a deep understanding of the Indian market. But, every great story has its twists and turns.
And in Reliance's case, the story takes a dramatic turn when Dhirubhai passes away in 2002. And this leads to uncertainty and ultimately a split in the Reliance empire. It's a whole chapter filled with family drama, boardroom battles, and ultimately a division of assets that would reshape the company's future.
Sounds like it's going to get intense. I'm ready to hear how it all unfolds.
Well, then let's dive into the next chapter. This is where we see the emergence of Mukesh and Anil Ambani. They each inherit their father's legacy, but take it in very different directions.
All right, grab your popcorn, everybody. Things are about to get interesting.
They are.
All right, so we left off with Dhirubhai Ambani's passing and the whole question of succession. What happened next? I mean, did they just split the company right down the middle?
Not exactly, no. It was a lot more complex than that, lots of back and forth. And honestly, a good deal of drama, too. We have to remember, it wasn't just a business, right? It was a family legacy. And Dhirubhai, he didn't leave a clear will, which, of course, just made everything more complicated.
Makes sense. So how did things play out between Mukesh and Anil? What were they even doing before all of this happened?
So before their father passed away, both brothers were very involved in Reliance already. Mukesh, the older brother, he focused on the core operations. So things like petrochemicals, refining, oil and gas exploration. He was known for being meticulous, his planning, his execution, a bit like his father in that way.
And Anil, what about him?
Anil was a little more flamboyant, let's say. He was involved in newer ventures like telecommunications, power, and financial services. People saw him as the charismatic one, more media savvy maybe.
So you have these two brothers, both super smart in their own ways, but with very different personalities and ways of doing business. I can already see the tension.
Right. And that tension, it all came to a head after Dhirubhai's death. There were disagreements about control, about their strategy, and really about the future direction of Reliance. And, the media had a field day with it, reporting on every little thing that happened.
Yeah, I bet. Must have been tough for everyone involved. So how did they finally resolve it? What happened?
After years of legal battles and negotiations, they finally came to a settlement in 2005. Mukesh, he got control of those core businesses, oil, gas, petrochemicals, refining. That all formed Reliance Industries Limited RIL.
Okay. And Anil, what did he end up with?
Anil took over the newer ventures, so telecommunications, power, infrastructure, financial services, and that created the Anil Dhirubhai Ambani Group, or ADG. It seemed like a clean break at the time, but the rivalry didn't just disappear.
I can see how personal feelings and business got all tangled up in that whole situation.
So after the split, what happened to the two Reliance empires? Did they both do well?
Well, their paths went in pretty different directions. Mukesh, with RIL, he really focused on what he knew best. He expanded that Jamnagar refinery, invested more in oil and gas exploration, and basically solidified Reliance's position as this global energy giant.
Right, and he also got into organized retail, didn't he? That's where Reliance Retail comes in.
Yeah, he recognized that huge potential in India's consumer market, which was growing so fast, so he launched Reliance Retail. And that eventually ended up being a lot of different things: supermarkets, hypermarkets, electronic stores, fashion outlets, even online grocery delivery.
So RIL kept growing and changing under Mukesh's leadership. What about Anil and Adug? How did they do?
Anil faced more challenges, I think. Some of his ventures, like Reliance Communications, they struggled to compete in the telecom market, which was changing so rapidly at that time. He had some successes, but some setbacks, too. It's interesting how it kind of reflects their personalities, right? Mukesh, he's that steady hand, consolidating and building on what already worked. Anil, he's the risk taker, trying new things, sometimes succeeding, sometimes not. But then Mukesh does something unexpected. He goes digital. He creates Reliance Jio. And that was huge, don't you think? It changed everything.
Oh, absolutely. Reliance Jio completely disrupted the telecom landscape in India. Mukesh's vision, it was all about providing affordable data to every single Indian. And he went for it with the same kind of boldness and scale that his father was known for.
I remember when Jio launched back in 2016, they offered free service for months, and then they had these incredibly low data prices. It was like an earthquake. All of a sudden, everyone in India had access to the internet.
Yeah, it was a masterclass in disruption. Jio's launch, it caused a price war. All the competitors had to slash their rates. And the result was a huge surge in internet usage all over India. It went from being a country that didn't have a lot of data access to being one of the biggest data consumers in the world. And it happened, like, overnight.
Crazy how quickly things changed. What were the effects of Jio down the line? Did it change other sectors too, or just telecom?
It went way beyond telecom. Oh, yeah. Jio's impact, it was massive. It sped up digital adoption, it helped e-commerce grow like crazy, and it basically created this whole new ecosystem of digital services. And it empowered millions of Indians. They had access to information, education, entertainment like they never did before.
But democratized the internet.
Yeah?
All of a sudden, someone in a village had the same access to information as someone in a big city. It leveled the playing field in a lot of ways.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about access either. It was about how affordable it was. Jio's low prices, they made it possible for people who never thought they could use the internet to connect with the world, start their own businesses, learn skills, and become part of the digital economy.
So Jio was like the foundation, but it was just the start of what Mukesh wanted to do, right? It was a part of a bigger strategy to create this whole digital world.
Right, and that's where we see Jio Platforms come in. It's a subsidiary, but it's more than just Jio's telecom operations. It's a whole bunch of digital apps and services. Everything from music streaming to mobile payments to online shopping to cloud computing.
So they built their own digital universe, basically. And they did a great job of attracting investment, too, didn't they? They got huge global players like Facebook, Google, and Qualcomm to put billions of dollars into Jio platforms.
Yeah, and those partnerships were strategic in a lot of ways. They gave Reliance access to new technologies, it legitimized their digital strategy on a global level, and it gave those global players a way to get into India's digital market, which was growing so fast. It was a win-win situation for everyone involved.
Speaking of win-win, let's talk about Reliance Retail. They've been quietly building this huge presence in the Indian retail market.
They have. Their strategy is pretty multifaceted. They've got all of these different types of stores, everything from small neighborhood supermarkets to these giant hypermarkets, electronic stores, fashion outlets. They're also expanding into smaller towns and rural areas, going after consumers that haven't really experienced modern retail before.
It seems like they're competing with everyone, from small family-owned shops to the big e-commerce giants. What's their secret? How are they managing to compete on so many fronts?
One of the key things is their integrated approach. They're not just building physical stores, they're blending the online and offline experiences. They call it new commerce, and it's all about making things smooth and seamless for the customer.
So it doesn't matter if you're shopping in an actual Reliance store or on your phone,
Yeah.
you're getting the same products, the same prices, the same loyalty programs.
Exactly. And a good example of this is GeoMart, their online grocery platform. They use the reach of Geo's digital network and combine it with the physical infrastructure of Reliance Retail to offer a huge selection of groceries, great prices, and really easy delivery options.
It's also interesting that they're not just trying to beat their traditional retailers, they're actually partnering with them. They've got this program where they bring small shopkeepers onto the GeoMart platform so they can compete in the digital world.
It's a smart move, for sure. It lets them tap into that huge network of Kirana stores, those small shops you see everywhere in India. They're the backbone of Indian retail. It's a win-win. Reliance reaches more customers, and the Kiranas get to stay in the game in the digital age.
And then we had the COVID-19 pandemic, which really pushed everything online. How did Reliance handle that?
Reliance was actually in a good position to deal with the pandemic. Their digital operations meant they could adapt quickly. GeoMart especially just blew up as people started ordering groceries online. They also used their manufacturing capabilities to make essential supplies like PPE and hand sanitizer.
So they weren't just surviving the crisis, they were helping the country get through it.
For sure. And it really reinforced this image of Reliance as a company that cares about more than just profits. They donated millions to relief efforts, provided free services to frontline workers, and even changed their factories to make ventilators. It was a moment that showed how committed they were to India.
Okay, so we've seen Mukesh take over the energy business, go all in on digital with Geo, and build this massive retail empire. But then he makes this surprising move. He goes into green energy. What was behind that?
Well, Mukesh, he's always thinking big. He sees green energy as the future, not just for Reliance, but for all of India. He's promised to invest billions of dollars to build these huge factories to make solar panels, batteries, and green hydrogen. It's a bold vision, but it's in line with India wanting to be energy independent and wanting to tackle climate change.
It's a huge thing to take on, but Reliance has pulled off big projects before. What will this green energy thing mean? Could it be as big as their move into telecom?
It's hard to say for sure, but the potential is definitely there. Reliance has the scale, the resources, and they know how to work the system. If they're successful, India could become a leader in renewable energy. It would create a ton of jobs and help India rely less on fossil fuels.
It's definitely a risk, but it makes sense given what's happening globally. But with all these projects and ventures, there's a big question, right? Mukesh isn't getting any younger. What about succession planning? Is Reliance ready for life after Mukesh?
That's the million-dollar question. Mukesh has started getting things ready for transition. His kids have been taking on bigger roles in the company. But can they be as successful as their father? Can they keep up the momentum? Can they handle the challenges of doing business in India? Nobody knows for sure.
It's the next chapter in the Reliance story, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. The succession drama, the digital revolution, their dominance in retail, the move into green energy. It's been a whirlwind of ambition, innovation, constant change. It's hard to keep track of it all.
I know, right? But at the heart of it all is the story that's connected to India's own journey, Reliance's rise. It reflects India's desire for growth, for self-reliance, for recognition on the world stage. And as India keeps changing, Reliance will change right along with it.
Before we finish up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about Reliance's story being a reflection of India's journey. Could you talk a little more about that? What are the main connections you see?
Sure. Like India, Reliance had to deal with this really challenging environment after independence. Lots of bureaucracy, lots of protectionist policies. They figured out how to succeed despite those limitations, just like a lot of Indian entrepreneurs did during the license Raj.
And then when India opened up its economy back in the early 1990s, Reliance was one of the first to take advantage of those opportunities.
Exactly. They jumped on liberalization, went into new sectors, and started competing globally. It was like they were reflecting what India wanted, to leave behind that socialist past and embrace a market-driven future.
And then came the digital revolution, which India just went crazy for. And Reliance, they were right there leading the way with Jio.
It's like they have this sixth sense for where India's headed and know how to be in the right place at the right time. And now, with all this focus on green energy and sustainability, they're once again aligning themselves with India's goals, its desire for a more sustainable future.
It's an amazing story. It's about ambition, about adapting, about really understanding the Indian market. But it also makes you think about these big questions, right? What's the role of huge corporations in a developing economy?
That's a whole other discussion, maybe for another time. But it's something to think about as we look more closely at Reliance.
Definitely. All right, before we get to our final thoughts, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment to wrap things up and leave you with something to chew on. All right, so we've really gone through this incredible journey that Reliance Industries has been on, from its humble beginnings to, becoming this global powerhouse. We've talked about how they dealt with all these political and economic changes, how they embraced innovation, and how they just kept pushing the limits of what a company can do.
And like we've been saying, their story is really tied to India's story, a nation that wants growth, that wants to be self-reliant, that wants to be a big player on the global stage. Reliance, in many ways, it embodies those aspirations, I think.
But it's not all just sunshine and roses and corporate success,
Yeah.
right? Reliance is huge, and it has so much influence that it raises questions about competition, about whether they dominate the market too much, and about what that means for smaller businesses.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're in so many different areas: energy, telecom, retail, digital services, and now green tech. They're part of the lives of millions of Indians every day. And with that much influence comes responsibility.
So what does all of this mean for the average person in India? How does Reliance's growth and influence actually affect their lives?
It's kind of a mixed bag, to be honest. On the one hand, they've created a lot of jobs, they've made a lot of products and services more affordable, and they've brought modern conveniences to people who might not have had them otherwise. Think about what Geo did for internet access and how affordable data became.
Right, Geo was a game changer for so many people. It gave them access to information and opportunities that they never had before.
Exactly. And Reliance Retail, with all their stores and their move into online shopping, they're making all kinds of products available to consumers all over the country, from big cities to small towns.
But there's also this argument, isn't there, that they're expanding so much that they're pushing out the smaller businesses, that they're becoming too big and stifling competition.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. There's always a risk when one company gets too much power. It can mean fewer choices for consumers. It can mean prices get manipulated. And it can mean the market isn't as dynamic as it could be. It's something that regulators need to watch carefully.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Mhm.
You want to encourage innovation and growth, but you also want to make sure everyone has a fair chance. It's a tough thing for governments to figure out, not just in India, but everywhere.
It really is. It's a complex issue. But it's a conversation that we need to be having, especially when we're talking about the role of these big corporations in an economy that's changing so fast.
So where does Reliance go from here? What's next for this company that's always reinventing itself?
Well, if you look at what they've done so far, I think they'll keep pushing the boundaries, they'll look for new opportunities, and they'll adapt as the market changes. They've already set some pretty ambitious goals, like becoming a global leader in green energy, making their digital ecosystem even bigger, and creating this seamless retail experience, phygital they call it, that blends online and offline shopping.
It's exciting to think about what they might do in the future. But we still have that question of succession hanging over everything. Can Mukesh Ambani's kids actually follow in his footsteps? Can they keep things moving forward the way he has?
It's the big mystery, right? Passing the leadership from one generation to the next is always tricky, especially in a family business. It's going to be really interesting to see how they handle it and what kind of mark they make on the company.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Reliance Industries, here's something to think about. Their story is a testament to what can happen when you have ambition, vision, and the courage to take risks. But it also makes you think about what it means to be successful and what responsibilities come with that success. It makes you think about how to balance innovation and competition and what happens when one company gets really, really big.
It's a journey that's not over yet. What they do in the next few decades, how they deal with the challenges and opportunities that come up, it's going to have a huge impact, not just on Reliance, but on India's economy and its technology.
Yeah, the story's still being written. It'll be fascinating to see what happens in the next chapter. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Reliance Industries. We hope you enjoyed it.